This session is about the audience that have very patiently been listening to all the presentations and have had some time for interaction, not too much. And a lot of sessions have had some carryovers to the tea and coffee discussions. But now is the time when you will hear from the session chairs as to what transpired, what came out of those sessions, and where do you feel is the issue, the nub of the issue, and if there are any issues that were left unaddressed or arguments that didn't finish, this is your opportunity to take them up. Would you? I'll take the seat with them right away. So Professor Nalapat will start with the very first session and what was his take.
Well, I just want to say that if you want to go into what was the essence of the entire discussion, I think, I want to go back to an individual whom I know quite well, and that individual is a person who I think all of you would have known very well. His name was Kanshi Ram, and he used to love showing a pen or a pencil in this form or in this form. And he used to say society should be like this, in the sense everybody should be equal. In my view, this is the mindset. Now, in deference to Swamiji yesterday, I'd like to use the word Hindu from today rather than Sanatan Dharma. As soon as from tomorrow, I might go back to Sanatan Dharma. But I believe this is the Hindu mindset. And from that point of view, it is a matter of surprise that the media was essentially, not only in India, but across the world, it was having differential standards. It was having, in Mr. Kanchiram's view, something like this. Like you have people here who don't count, and you have people here who count a lot. So if there are, let us say, atrocities against people at this level, it's not reported at all. But you have a lower level of atrocities at people at this level, it's reported very, very extensively. And I gave the example of Kashmir, where several dozen temples, I have myself seen about, Ms. Banzai is from that area, I have myself seen about 6 or 7 temples who are completely destroyed in Kashmir. Now, each of this is a house of worship. Now, I have also seen in the way the commentaries that have been made on specific houses of worship that have been destroyed in India. I'm not going to cast any negative comment on that kind of commentary. But I'd simply like to say, a house of worship in Kashmir, a house of worship near Srinagar, a house of worship in Baramulla is as much a house of worship as a house of worship in Faizabad or anywhere else. So I just want to say that for some reason, the media seems to have adopted this kind of a strategy in which one section is almost out of sight. It's under the water. And whatever happens is under the water. Whether it is discrimination against, for example, what is called Haris in Pakistan, discrimination against Christians there, discrimination against individuals in Bangladesh, or even discrimination against people in parts of India, for example in Kashmir. There seems to be almost no comment on that, but a lot of comment on people who are regarded somehow at the top end. And the question is, why are these situations and these people at the top end? What can be done to ensure that this is the way that media looks at society, so that whatever negative thing happens, whoever it happens to, whichever segment of the population it happens to, the media should take it equally seriously. The reason why I'm saying this is an enormous amount of, if I may say so, social oppression, discrimination, etc. is taking place across the world. But in my estimate, about 2 to 5% of that is getting reported. And 95% of this is taking place, in a sense, under the water. So bringing this 95% above the water, I think is going to be a very, very important aspect of what the media should do. Now, the second, I think, point that we stressed here was basically the issue of confidence. We had a young man, Trinidad and Tobago, who was talking about the fact that there was a lot of negativism about his particular community. He fought that negativism. He established a very successful enterprise, and that enterprise grew from almost nowhere into a very major media enterprise. So I think the message given was two. One is confidence, that you have to have confidence in yourself. And I would like to say quite clearly that there is a perception that, for example, the Hindus, they have suffered under occupation of one section, occupation of another section. So in a sense, that has shown their inferiority. But if you look at it in a different way, if you look at it in terms of core values, if you look at it in terms of core beliefs, and despite whatever has happened, if those core values and core beliefs have remained intact, it is not a defeat, it has never been a defeat, it's a victory. Because ultimately, the only defeat can be if you lose your core values, if you lose your core identity. If that is not lost, let me assure you, it is not at all a defeat. So any feeling of inferiority, in my view, is completely unmerited by the circumstance. So this determination, this confidence, this persistence is something which a speaker mentioned and another speaker from Mauritius also mentioned. I don't want to go beyond this because Sushil has said, let's confine this to 2 or 3 minutes. The point I'd just like to make is, when you are really defending the Hindu, as I said yesterday, you are defending a blood group that is O, and which is a universal blood group. So you are defending values that are universal values to humanity. You are defending attributes that are universal attributes to society. And I would like to say, I see these attributes, again I use the word Hindu, I don't dare use the word Sanatana Dharma in this hall. So I would like to say, these Hindu attributes are there in every individual on the planet. There is a little bit of the Hindu in every individual in the planet. And that being the case, it is the responsibility of media, it's the responsibility of communication to ensure that those who are on the planet, that little bit becomes greater and greater and greater. And this applies very well to the communities that call themselves Hindu as well, because these communities have an exclusive mindset, if these communities have an intolerant mindset, if these communities are saying that, look, my way or the highway, then certainly there's a problem there. The broad, exclusive, the non-exclusivist, the broad, moderate contours of thought, which really defines Hinduism, these are there in every human being. And I think it is important for the media to celebrate that and to ensure that every human being is somehow empowered to develop this Hindu-ness, if I may say so, in his or her mind. Because ultimately, the future of the world is the knowledge economy. Wherever I go, in the US, in Hong Kong, in Bangalore, anywhere, I find, again, Prime Minister Modi never uses the word Hindu. I have also never used the word Hindu. I'm using the word Hindu more times this evening than I've used in my entire life before this. But I would like to say that in this knowledge economy, I find Hindus everywhere. And Hindus do extremely well. Now, we have an assumption that if you work somewhere out, you're some kind of a coolie. Now, one of our Manipal graduates is now the head of Microsoft. He's not a coolie. One of the Manipal graduates is now the head of Nokia. He's certainly no coolie. And if he's a coolie, then we need many millions of such coolies all over the world. So I just want to end by saying our point is very simple. And my point I want to, let us remain O group. Let us be a group that can fit seamlessly into the bloodstream of any society without creating reaction. There are blood groups that if you inject into a bloodstream, it creates a reaction, it may create a fatal reaction. There are some specific blood groups of that type. But our blood group is O, and that we can, in any society, it is welcomed, it is absorbed, it becomes a natural part of that society. That essential breadth is what defines, and now allow me to say, is what defines Sanatana Dharma. This is why I'd like to say, I've always been proud to be called a follower of Sanatana Dharma. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nalapad. And this was summed up in a very evocative imagery by him, where he compared a drop of ink in a glass of water as opposed to a drop of milk in a glass of water. While ink colors the water much faster than milk does, our effort should be to enable milk to be as quick and as effective as a drop of ink. Thank you so much, Professor Nalamal. I now request Amit Khanna ji, who chaired the second session on technology and future.
Good evening. There were two aspects which were discussed in yesterday's session. I actually talked a lot about technology, and Sandeep Tarkas and Srikant Shastri actually talked about digital economy and consumption pattern. Two things which sort of emerge out of that conversation, out of those conversations are one, that most people tend to be technology agnostic. They think technology is something which does not directly intervenes in their lives. It does not impact their lives as much as what we now call it within quotes content, because technology is something which somebody else handles or which enables you to do things. Well, that is right to a certain extent, but let us actually see certain, accept certain truths. Never before in the history, or in human history, have we had such a networked society. Today, out of a population of 7.5 billion people, 3.5 billion people today are connected with telephones, wired and wireless. There are 3.2 billion people who watch television more than 30 minutes a day. The global attendance in cinema theaters is roughly 4.8 billion people every year. The newspaper readership is roughly, again, close to 5 billion readers every year. And I mentioned about data, that in one day we are uploading 5 exabytes of data, which is equivalent to 2,500 years, or the entire history of 2,100 years of our recorded history in any form, written word, images, pictures, music, everything put together. So we are adding that every day. That actually then transforms itself or subsumes into what is now being termed as big data. And big data is the next big thing on the event horizon. This impacts us in several ways. Currently, we are using what is the current iteration of the internet, that the World Wide Web, is called Web 2.0, which can be in simplistic term be explained as collaborative web. That is why you saw the emergence of Facebook, Twitter, and all the other social networking websites. The important point to note is that the next iteration of the web will happen very seamlessly, quietly, without our knowing, within the next 3 years. It's not something which is in the distant future. And this one small transition is going to impact our lives in a more significant manner than what has happened in the last 2,500 years or 2,100 years. The reason is simple. One of the important changes in this is in Web 3.0 is, again simplistically put, it is machine-to-machine web network, where it's complete disintermediation. And I was trying to explain to the young lady here that how social networking, for example, will immediately change. This whole business of trolling will cease because it can be handled by a machine. And similarly, if I need to, there's a limit to how many tweets which you can do, which a person can do humanly possible, because obviously one person cannot be doing it in a 24-hour cycle, but a machine can. So both both interventions will be machine made, and these are thinking machines. These are not dumb machines. So it will not be just repetitive, by the rote that there's some lines fed into a computer and it keeps on rolling. No, it will think and understand. Anyway, that's one part of it. But the more immediate and impactful Sandeep Karkas also made a mention in his presentation, is what we call the Internet of Things. It's absolutely unimaginable. I'm using the same word, of how it will change our lives, of every simple person's life. I'll give a small example. 20 years ago, when the computers were in India were very new, there was a young scientist who's now heading one of the corporations called Professor Sugata Gupta. He used to be in IIT Delhi. He did a small experiment next to the IIT complex was a big slum. So he was actually interested in the educational aspect of the net, and we're talking of early days of the net, very slow speed, etc., and not many websites. So he installed 2 touch screen, black and white screens on a wall which faced the slums. And there was no promotion, nobody told anyone what they were. Slowly the children from the slums would come and see these, they thought this is TVs, and they would see movies or what they used to see. But they realized that there was something else. Within 20 days, a group of young children from the slums had figured out that these were computer terminals, and you could actually get information out of it. This was the first experiment in the world of its kind. Similarly, yesterday a lady mentioned that, at what age, asked a question, at what age do we allow our young children? Today a 3-year-old wants to handle an iPad. The fact is, and I said this yesterday also, and I'd like to re-emphasize today, this is the analog mindset. We come from, either we are digital migrants, or some of our are digitally ignorant, but there are very few digital natives. People who have been born at a time in the digital age. But within the next 3-5 years, we are in the 15th year of the digital age. In India, we can say it's about 10 years, because the early adopters were mostly scientific personnel and the other. So what will happen is that in another 5 years, you will have an entire section of people who are 5, 7 today would be growing up, and the ones who are there. So in 5 years, you will have at least 1/3 of the population who will be digital natives. They will not understand what we today perceive as old analog growth. So for him or her, they have not seen anything which is not online. They do not belong to a world where Google didn't exist. They do not belong to a world where there was no live streaming. They do not belong to a world where there is no SMS, where there is no social networking, where there is everything not available on tap. So this has social implications, besides the economic implications. And consequently, it will have implications on religion, on society, on politics. And as interlocutors, we have to be prepared to intervene in a manner which is befitting that age, not trying to obstruct it. One of the things which I see sometimes, and I try and explain in my own way, and I saw it here also among some people, is that they constantly talk about the past. The past is our inheritance. It's genetically coded in my memory. I will not lose my culture. The culture has survived without me for 5,000 years. And the culture will survive without me for the next 5,000 years. But I must have the ability to intervene, to interlocute in a manner which is positive and which helps me ride this momentum. Don't dissipate your energy trying to obstruct a change which will happen with or without you. And be prepared for the consumer of tomorrow, because that consumer of tomorrow will consume everything, from religion to films, from politics to education, from health to economic activity. So you have to be prepared, and that is, I think, the essence of what we discussed yesterday. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Amitji. Just to add a word, because the way he began was what summed up everything that followed. He said we are in an engagement age. We are not anymore gathering eyeballs, or for that matter, aggregating mere numbers. Today is the time when we discuss as to how much time is being spent by the consumer of media on the content we offer, in the manner we offer, and it is this degree of engagement which will define how impactful or how purposeful you've been with the consumer. I now request Kaveri Banzai. She headed this morning's first session on social media.
Which was very enlightening for me, because the main thing that came out of it was that social media has helped people to create an alternative discourse, bypassing what they see as the monopoly of what they like to call the mainstream media, which is people like me. So it was quite eye-opening for me to be described as a bottleneck rather than how we see ourselves as an open platform. But there were some things that I took away from there, which resulted from the amazing presentations I saw from Sandeep Balakrishna, Neena Rai, Vikas Pandey, and Rahul Sharma. One, I think that, and Amit Khanna also referred to it, that we are now living in a digital age, and this is the 10th year of that, and the future will belong to people who are digital natives. And I think I see 3 or 4 trends. One is that I think individuals like Neena or Sandeep, individuals with domain expertise, I think people, readers, will follow them wherever they are, whatever platform they go to, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Facebook, whatever new platform some coolie, as Monu Nalapat said, is thinking of somewhere in the world. Whatever platform comes, I think people will follow them. People will follow these individuals with domain expertise. So I think the responsibility of people who have that domain expertise is twofold. One, to continue with the kind of research and the kind of fact-checking that they're doing right now. Two, to I think create a whole new generation, to mentor young people and to create another generation like them who are as good with their facts, as good with their concept of history, with their concept of the economy as they are. So I think that's one takeaway that I had, that you increasingly will find the attention economy. Again, it's a phrase I borrowed from Amit Khanna many years ago.
Now engagement.
Yeah, okay. So this economy will comprise increasingly of such individuals, and I think all of us should be prepared for that. And I think if we want to prepare ourselves for this age, we have to do the same. We have to find our areas of expertise, whatever it is, whether it's politics or economy or society. We have to find what we want to specialize in and work very, very hard. Neena, I found, tweets every 10 minutes, okay? And she doesn't tweet nonsense, let me tell you. She tweets sense. Sandeep has been blogging for 14 years. It requires a lot of commitment. It requires a lot of dedication. It can be sometimes a very lonely pursuit, but that's what it is. Second, I think the whole idea of creating networks, I think that's again very important. All of us who are in the business of reaching out to people, connecting to people, have to connect with people like ourselves, people who, or with other people, but create networks. I think that's important. So mentorship, networks, research, and the last point I want to mention is that I think a lot of young people I heard today, not just on the dais, there's a tremendous sense of energy. I think everyone worked very hard. I mean, this is people who work for the BJP. This is people who work for the elections. Everyone worked very hard, and there was a great sense of momentum. My point is this energy that has been created. What do you do with it now? Now that which is a question I posed again in the morning. What do you do with this energy now? You've got so many volunteers. You're also adept at modern technology. You've managed to raise awareness, create attention. What do you do with this energy now? I think that is the most critical thing. How you use it positively, how you use it for a good cause, I think that's very, very key. And I think that will be the key to how we are shaping our future as well, whether it's for digital natives or digital migrants like myself, how we use this energy, harness it well, and keep the momentum going for a good cause. That's important. And what Monu Nalapat said, this how we are not exclusivist, we're all encompassing, we're all inclusive. I think that is the spirit with which we should approach it. That's it basically. That's what. But I have to say it was really eye-opening for me. I've never felt so much in a minority before.
Thank you. Well, that's the measure of things here in this conference for the last 2 days. The next 2 sessions belong to the commerce of media and the entertainment media, which was the immediately last session before this one. In the commerce of media, we had Shrikant Khandekar, we had Jwalant Swaroop, and we also had, R.R. Gopalji from Dinamala. This session was about a great deal of soul searching in terms of where we are headed in terms of the commerce of media. R.R. Gopalji made a presentation about how the traditional media, the ink on paper media, is now getting squeezed, is getting sandwiched between television, which has evolved in the last 4 decades to a very robust presence, has gone ahead of print almost in terms of revenue. On the other hand, the new media, the technology-driven media, which is again nibbling away at print. And print is losing its share of advertising, its share of revenues, though the overall growth of print in markets, evolving markets in India, is still there. But in terms of share, it is consistently dropping. This drop is more visible in magazines. There was no representative of magazines here, but Kaveri would. Not in commerce, not in the session on commerce. So which is coming. So Kaveri would vouch for me that when I say that magazines are suffering the most in this decline, you know where we are headed. Gopalji's presentation concluded with the fact that yes, there is perhaps room to be created for others, but the relevance of print as a medium can't be written off in a hurry. It is there to stay with coffee and happiness. So he's hoping for a very peaceful, accommodating coexistence of all these media for a wholesome service to the consumer. We had Jwalant Swaroop again saying that there are unmistakable pointers towards changes in the commerce of media. And this is coming from the fact that content is increasingly getting free. In fact, content has become free. In my forward, in my curtain raiser to this issue, I had mentioned that from 80s, ever since there was a price war unleashed by Times of India among the print newspapers, we've had a kind of distortion in the economy. This distortion has led to over-dependence on advertising money to stay relevant. The kind of price one paid for a copy of newspaper in 1980 was more than the kind of price one paid for 4 times bigger size of newspaper 20 years later in 1999. Now that kind of distortion is unsustainable. When salaries have risen, rents have risen, electricity, fuel, everything else had risen, how can newspaper 4 times its size cost less than half? But this is where you saw large media tycoons in a slugfest of the marketplace trying to bleed each other white. This was the time when invitation pricing came in, when predatory circulation modes were applied, and newspapers were paying back to each other in the same coin. You bleed me white in my market, I'll bleed you white in yours. And there started the overdependence on advertising. But what it led to is the relatively weaker newspapers getting squeezed out and no new newspapers coming in. For a democracy, for plurality of ideas to survive, we need a free access to entrepreneurs in the marketplace of ideas as well as business, which today is denied no new newspaper unless it has 100 crores to burn and no expectation of a healthy bottom line in the first 3-4 years can enter this marketplace. And we need to ask ourselves this question, whether this masquerading of a price war was actually trying to create entry barriers in the marketplace and create monopolies, which we need to address squarely, because towards the end of that session I mentioned that this also calls for, or you should recall, there is a practice in the Commerce Ministry where if there is an import at lower than the manufacturing cost, they levy countervailing duties. Those duties are called dumping, anti-dumping taxes. If in the media marketplace, entrenched media entrepreneurs resort to this practice in order to ban or in order to prevent the entry of healthy competition, I think government must intervene. Media is no longer a holy cow where taxes can't be thought of. This could be a bit of a politically incorrect statement, but you must see how media today is not anymore just a passive reflecting mirror. It is an active player with an agenda, with a perspective, which it is unabashedly pushing given every opportunity. It is a business, a very powerful business, which seeks to intervene in policy making, which seeks to intervene in positioning individuals. Anyway, so that's where the session was headed, and we finally had Shrikant Khandekar mentioning very clearly that it is now an issue of delivery system, which obviously overlaps a great deal with what Mr. Khanna has pointed us to. Content has to be interesting for anybody to consume or to even engage with or look at. While you may have interesting content, but if you are not delivering it efficiently, then that relevant, interesting content goes waste. And it is in this war of more efficient, less expensive, more convenient delivery system that good content creators, traditional media enterprises are failing and new non-media backgrounds are succeeding where none such scope existed a short while back. And therefore, we need to be very careful about not just content that ought to remain relevant, sharp, but also the technological aspect of it, where it needs to evolve new technology. Music is the same that we love, but today we have a different device to have it from, a different way of consuming it. And that was where the commerce of media session rested, that we are changing irrespective of whether we like it or not, and we need to tame that change to not be run over by it. Finally was the session on entertainment. How does one sum up that session? We had Major Ravi, who literally walked away with the session at the very opening remarks. Fascinating, passionate. Major Ravi, for those who didn't attend that session, you did? Good. So I think that's even bigger challenge, because then you are there to know as to what I'm saying and what I'm omitting. I don't think I can even dare to attempt summing up what Mr. Major Ravi said. But a few points that he made were very clear, that to even entertainment media, unless we bring a rightly honed mind, a clear mind which is rooted in what is it that you would like to see happen as a result of what you're offering, there's no point in it. He brings his background of a commando, a soldier who's involved in investigation, in security, in events of a lifetime nature, and the sum total of that he brings to bear upon the films he makes his craft, his storylines, his characterization in the movies. And he insists, he's convinced that that is the way for any creative artist, a filmmaker, a media professional to be. Bring that commitment, bring that clarity of devotion, of being rooted in what he lives for. And there couldn't have been any argument on that. We had Ms. Sukanya Ramesh. It was a breathtaking presentation. The sheer expanse of it, the issues she touched, whether it is the propriety which takes precedence over professional benefits, over lucre, over money. It is about not compromising on the dignity, as opposed to a professional environment where there is a lot of persuasion and a lot of pressure to conform. It is about how we make sure that our entertainment is healthy, and therefore our children, our society, the women at home contribute their bit to this value system. And then there was, of course, Mr. Priyadarshan, unmistakable, with all his experience of making films. He was very candid about certain things. Even in the question answer session, it came out very clear that there are lot of issues that you can pick and choose to champion the cause of, to use your craft and to use your profession to contribute to. And you may like to depict mythology, you may like to depict history, you may like to depict a glorious past, something that you would like to hold up to your next generation. Some others may like to address poverty, some others may like to address malnutrition, crime, and a whole host of things that prevail in society. I personally don't think there is a conflict between the two, but it's a matter of individual choice, his professional liberty as to what is it that he takes up to reflect his craft, his creative freedom, to reflect his worldview, his way of looking at things. But all the same, he felt that there is a great responsibility for a mass media producer and a creative professional to reflect Indian ethos, to preserve Indian way of life. He in fact started the presentation with an objection to the word Bollywood, which he feels is a caricature from the word Hollywood and doesn't reflect Indian film industry and put it in right perspective. Now that set the pace for his entire presentation, and you could have imagined as to what he meant. These were the 5 sessions that took place, and I'm sorry, I'm saying this all without the aid of a paper, out of only memory. I must have missed out a lot, but most of you were there in most of these presentations. The stage is open. We are all here to answer questions, and feel free, this is an open session, it belongs to you. Sir.
No questions but comments. I am a Bangladeshi journalist, but I am here not because I am a journalist. I am here only because I am a Hindu. I shall tell you a very short story of two Bangladeshi kids. One is of Sujan, he is a teenager. The another is of Yasin, he is 12 years old. Last month, I was riding on a auto rickshaw in Dhaka. There was enormous traffic jam, so our auto rickshaw was stopped. I started conversation with my teenager driver Sujan. I asked him, "What is your name?" He said, "Sujan." Sujan. Then again, I asked him, "Aage piche kya hai?" He replied, "Kuch nahi." Then I asked again, "Are you Hindu or Muslim?" He said, "Sir, I am a Muslim." Then a few minutes later, he asked me, "Sir, are you Hindu?" I said, "Yes." Then Sujan replied, "Sir, I am also a Hindu. My mother is a Hindu, my father is a Muslim. They are separated now. I am with my mother. You see." Then he brought his wallet and showed me a picture of Lord Krishna. I said that, "What was your original name? Your mother used to call you." He said that Gautam. And he said that my mother is a Brahmin. Then I said that from today you are not Sujan Mia, you are Gautam Chakraborty. I shall take care of you. And Sujan, within 1 month, he became Gautam Chakraborty. He is a auto rickshaw driver. We 10 to 12 friends, all are Hindus. We accumulated some wealth for an auto rickshaw to give him. We presented him a auto rickshaw. He is a proud Hindu now. The another story of Yasin, he is 12 years old. I used to visit to my Muslim friend. He is a very popular leader and he is known as a progressive one.
Known as?
A progressive person.
Okay.
This
Progressive.
Yasin, I found him in his house. One day, seeing my sacred thread in my hand, this Yasin asked me, "Sir, are you a Hindu?" I said, "Yes." Then I said, "How could you understand that I am a Hindu?" He replied that seeing sacred thread in your hand. I said, "You are a Muslim, but you could detect this sacred thread." He said that our parents are Hindu, but they are very poor, so my mother gave me to this family, Muslim family. They call me Yasin. Then when my Muslim friend came, I told him, "Look, you are known as a progressive one. Give my Lakhan back to me. I want to take him with me." Then Yasin again became Lakhan and he is in my care of, in my domestic house. Thank you, sir. This is the story of Yasin and Sujan. They are now Gautam and Lakhan. I want to add, in the year 1955, in the then East Pakistan, Chief Secretary was Aziz Ahmad, a Punjabi bureaucrat. He said to Mrs. Nelly Sengupta, the then leader of Pakistan National Congress, thumping on the table, that I know how to eliminate Hindus from Pakistan. Now, Pakistan has gone, Bangladesh was created, Aziz Ahmad is no more, but we, the 2 crore Hindus, are in Bangladesh and we are increasing day by day. This is the hard reality. So, at the end, I shall say, if Hinduism lives, who dies? If Hinduism dies, who lives? Thank you all.
Dhanyavad. Thank you. Could I get your name again, please?
My name, Sanjeev Chaudhary,
Thank you, sir.
a journalist from Bangladesh.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments. Well, there is a question here.
Actually, my question, Madam Kavita ji asked us a question.
Kaveri.
Kaveri ji, sorry, asked us a question. She asked us a question. I'm not a BJP supporter, a BJP soft-hearted, you can say. So she asked the question that what ahead for the BJP supporters. As Rahul Bhai mentioned earlier, that we will consolidate Rajya Sabha seats with the general election, state elections are going to happen. We want to consolidate. And I want to also mention that we BJP supporters are also very critical to the government. The policies like they gave aid to Gaza. We criticized it on Twitter. We are having a Twitter panelist, Meena ji, Sandeep ji are sitting with me. So they will, they gave aid to Gaza. Next was like the new Maharashtra government, their reservation. We raised the issue. So we are also opposers of the government. So we want to also tell the government that we also have a voice, please listen to us. But there is also other political affiliation on Twitter called Aam Aadmi Party, they have supporters. But what policy they make is a Bible to their supporters, they trend it and everything. So this is this is the reality on the Twitter. The force of Aam Aadmi Party is what Mr. Kejriwal says, be it the bad for the country, like Gaza, they made our foreign policy is not our foreign policy. They took a march to Gaza, to the Israeli embassy in Delhi. This is not our foreign policy. We don't mingle. We don't act as two-party issues. We don't come in two-party issues. So I want to just say.
Yeah, so there is a marked difference between a kind of Twitter users and the other, is what he's trying to do.
No, and I think he's also making the point that they're also alert to government's issues. I mean, it's not just a question of a certain party coming to power, they also have to deliver.
Absolutely.
And that's a very key thing that
You know, I think
Just to add to what
Yeah.
he
may I
said.
just also this comment and maybe then you can react. You know, I think one of the challenges which I've seen, and this is to the team sitting here which tweets, is that I do not get a sense of active governance of anyone besides Narendra Modi. So what are the rest 45 ministers doing? When most of the comments are based on as a reaction to someone else's comment. I need, as a citizen, and especially if you want to get the intelligence or the intelligentsia on your side, you need to have the ability to communicate in an effective and simple manner. What are the governance steps which are being taken? Not broad policy statements. Because I'll give you an example. If an important industrialist reads a statement, he's not going to be impressed by a broad sweeping statement that we are going to have economic reform. Economic reform is a very wide ranging term. What are the specifics? What have you managed to achieve? If you move a bill which is not passed, that is no progress. So the fact that you are going to bring 5 bills to the winter session is not progress. That's actually wrong communication. Because at the end of the day, winter session, people will say, well, before the winter session, you brought 5 bills. At the end of the winter session, there are still 5 bills which are pending. So when you tweet for the budget session, you will still be saying we are now bringing 10 bills because there are 5 which are pending from the last session and we are bringing 5 from fresh bills. So this communication skill has also to keep in mind that broad promises do not work at a micro level.
Yes, after you, the gentleman here.
You wanted to say something?
You
Sorry.
wanted to say something?
No, it's okay.
No, have I answered?
You're good at anticipating
Trends in question.
future.
मेरा नाम रमाकांत है. Regarding the Bollywood and the name Hollywood, जैसे अमित जी is here, कुछ देखिए बिना गवर्नमेंट एड के India is producing the largest number of films. मैं ये कहना चाह रहा हूँ कि ये पूरे वर्ल्ड की कंट्रीज इतनी सब्सिडीज और कितने इंसेंटिव्स दे रहे हैं, और हिंदुस्तान की गवर्नमेंट अगर इसमें पूरा ब्रांड इंडिया इमेज, ब्रांड हिंदुइज्म इमेज, अगर गवर्नमेंट गंगा के किनारे, क्योंकि वो समुद्र के किनारे बॉलीवुड पल रहा है, वो शायद बहुत दूसरा है, गंगा के किनारे कुछ बॉलीवुड कोई सिटी लेके आए तो उसकी आत्मा, हिंदुस्तान की आत्मा वो पूरे वर्ल्ड में जाएगी। तो इस तरह से कुछ करिए ना, और गवर्नमेंट उनको फिल्म मेकर्स को इंसेंटिव्स दे, यहाँ के लोगों को जो कुछ कर।
देखिए, कोई फिल्म के लिए जो फिल्म सिटी या कोई ऐसा स्थान अगर आप तैयार करें या नया क्षेत्र बनाएं जिसमें शूटिंग जाके कर सके, उससे तरक्की नहीं होती। फिल्म के माध्यम को, ये मैंने खुद कहा था जो आप कह रहे हैं, ये जो सॉफ्ट पावर की हम बात करते हैं, शायद जितने प्रमुख फिल्म बनाने वाले देश हैं उनमें मैं यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स ऑफ अमेरिका का जिक्र भी करूँगा। शायद भारत ही एक ऐसा देश है जहाँ पे सरकार कोई सहायता नहीं करती, बल्कि एक सबसे ज़्यादा टैक्स लगाती है। अगर आप मनोरंजन पे कर लगाएंगे तो कैसे चलेगी दुनिया? ये तो एक इसका जो तर्क है वो मुझे समझ ही नहीं आया पिछले 45 साल में कि आप मनोरंजन कर क्यों लगाते हैं।
Mr. Khanna, you raised a very valid point. Intelligentsia doesn't appreciate what they tweet, but their target is not intelligentsia. Their target, just let me finish. Their target of their tweet.
I did say that.
Okay, you were trying to say that intelligentsia doesn't appreciate. I mean, there should be more. I mean, they should convey that.
I said if
okay,
you want to
what's
attract
done-
intelligentsia,
Yeah.
if you want to
Yeah,
get
I mean-
intelligentsia to yourself.
Yes, but it's not. Their target is not that. Their target is mass,
No,
and the
they
masses forget what happens in the
I
3 months'
did
time.
not, you're confusing two issues.
Yeah.
I did not say this at all.
Okay. Okay. Let it be that way. My question is to you, big editors sitting on the dais. This Twitter and Facebook and WhatsApp. The breaking news happens on that nowadays, right? The news is on that before you do anything, right? I mean, you will become irrelevant in a few days' time. Right?
Yes, that's what I said.
Will?
That's what I've been saying.
You're saying Will?
Are you trying to say they have?
We said
Ask
that, I said
them.
that my entire
He has said that. But I think that is what I was trying to say, that our challenge now is to become people who will be
Yes.
listened to, read, for what expertise we have. Hopefully in all these years we have developed some expertise in some field, and we will take it with us whatever the platform is. So it doesn't matter, print may become obsolete. Hopefully there will be people who will read me or anyone, forget me, anyone, in some other platform. So it's very true what you're saying. Breaking news is happening on Twitter. I myself follow it. I know it happens there.
Yeah, it
But
will-
it
it will actually
become
accentuate,
quicker.
yeah.
Yeah, it
So
becomes-
how you feel? The big powerful editors.
Kaveri is now the editor of an online newspaper.
So I'm changing fast. But I totally agree with you. There's no question of that. When we feel, what do we feel? We feel powerless? No, we never felt powerful
No.
anyway.
Control over the news, that is gone. What should go on and what shouldn't.
No, I don't think anyone ever felt.
No, in fact, my presentation yesterday was only about this. That you have to anticipate technology, you have to not keep defending yourself and saying, no, this will not happen, we will not let it happen. It will happen. And when there is, let me give you one very interesting analogy, which I have shared with Kaveri several years ago. That, there are, when there is a climate change which happens, when a river changes its course, it floods. So a riverine change is flooding and everything gets inundated. But when a glacier moves, it moves with so much force and with so little speed that you do not even notice it, but it's complete annihilation. So that is what technology does. You can see the small upheavals which you people have been raising objections about, whether this is anti-Hindu, this is against our culture. That's a riverine immediate destruction which you see. You are not prepared to see that glacier which is moving, which includes not only faith, it includes technology, it includes religion, it includes science, which is driving the change with so much force that will change the geopolitics. So how are you prepared to handle that? That is an important question.
So I just want to add to what you're saying. I mean, I'm not entirely in agreement that anyone is going to become extinct. For example, Girilal Jain, he was editor of Times of India way back. And I think Girilal Jain anticipated a lot of the thinking which came subsequently. Now, some of us have been writing for several decades about the colonial system of law, that essentially we are not a free country. I mean, we are supposed to be a democracy, but we have got colonial laws, colonial practices. Now I find almost every second person is now repeating in platforms colonial law, colonial practice, colonial administration. I mean, but I mean, 20, 30 years ago when it was first articulated, nobody was saying that. Everybody talked in terms of this being a perfect democracy. I think the whole point about ideas is that they're like pollen. You pollinate the atmosphere and then people, different people get pollinated and then they spread. So the question is, what kind of pollen? Is it pollen which is in a sense harmful, or is it allergic reaction, or is it pollen that's good? So I think it's a long way before Kaveri, for example, becomes insignificant. I think you'll have to keep this pollination process will go on. But the good news is that it can be done not by so-called editors, but by almost anybody.
Yes.
And the bad news is, I just had one more point. No, the bad news is that this is one of the most primitive countries where bandwidth is concerned.
Yes.
It's one of the most primitive countries where internet speeds are concerned. It's one of the most primitive countries where entry barriers, there's so many entry barriers. It's one of the most primitive countries where internet penetration is concerned. So I would say in the next 3 to 5 years, unless this primitive situation is reversed, you're going to find a block to the pollen.
South Korea has the fastest.
Yeah, I mentioned yesterday that we are laying down a national optic fiber grid, which is a 1 gigahertz grid. In 2020, there will be no gigahertz internet. It will be terabit. So I find it stupid. By the time our national grid will be ready, we will actually we'll have to start obsolete. So we'll have to start relaying the pipes. So these are the things which we need to keep in mind. Always remember, and both my friends have mentioned this, that you always will need a story to tell. That's a human need, a basic human need. You will always need the need to know first. The immediacy of news has become democratic now. Earlier it was, when the elections were held, when I was a little boy, I used to remember as a 10-year-old boy walking up to the Hindustan Times building. They used to put a board, where they used to rub with a chalk.
The tally.
And, so that sense of immediate. The other example is, I was sitting with a group of sociologists and anthropologists recently in Europe. And we were discussing, so what I gave an example to them of the village chopal. Now, what we need to be prepared is, and a lot of people say कि वो जो चाय का ढाबा है हाईवे पे, या जो गांव की चौपाल है, या पीपल का पेड़ है जिसके इर्द गिर्द लोग बैठ के बतियाते थे, गपशप लगाते थे, वो डिजिटल इकोनॉमी में क्या होगा? तो डिजिटल का भी एक चौपाल बन रहा है. ये सोशल नेटवर्किंग जो है, मैं वही सोशल नेटवर्किंग will ultimately evolve into this, because the problem is, and I'm constantly keep repeating myself, none of us is prepared for the onslaught of the amount of data which will be is being unleashed. And as more speed is made available, as more bandwidth is made available, as newer devices come, you'll be overwhelmed. So we have, as a country, as people, we have to be prepared for this onslaught. We are not.
No, I just want to make another point, for example. If you look at the internet laws in India, they are among the most, I think North Korea has got more progressive laws than India. And you know, if you look at the television, I mean, you know, it's Lynch X, Lynch Y. Now recently in Bangalore there was, in school, some individual is supposed to have done something which is intolerable. But then the director, the principal, almost everybody has been arrested. They are in jail. Now, I think that is going to have a chilling effect on people who want to set up a school in Bangalore. So, this kind of a lynch mob mentality, frankly, this kind of a lynch law. Now, Mr. Kapil Sibal and Mr. Chidambaram, during the last 10 years, introduced so many so-called transgressions, so many activities have been made transgressions, so many transgressions have been made jail. So, jail has become the first option. Today, if Amit Khanna comes back with 3 bottles of alcohol from the customs, they can send him to jail. Tomorrow, if some income tax officer tells me that I am guilty of 15,000 rupees or something I have not put in my income tax return, now he can do that on complete subjectivism, that's the law in India. I have no recourse, because Chidambaram has taken away the right to go to court. I can be sent to jail for that 15,000 rupees. So today there's a dense web of activities in which you can send a person to jail. So we are saying, why don't people invest in India? For heaven's sake, if you invest in India, any television anchor can send you to jail at any time.
I think this terabyte, gigabytes issue reminds me about 20 years back when satellite television was just about coming. The bold and the beautiful was raging. And suddenly, in Parliament, some of the culturally conscious parliamentarians began to fume. They said, this is invasion from the skies. This is cultural pollution, which probably they were right about. But the prescription, they said, was ban these channels. And how do you ban these channels? Ban their uplinking. Now what happened? Entire uplinking shifted to Hong Kong and Singapore. It kept getting uplinked, it kept getting downlinked in India, and the entire network spread. Singapore was equally conscious of these issues. What they banned was downlinking, not uplinking. They said you can uplink from here whatever you want to, but you can't downlink this thing here. They had at that time laws against surrogate advertising, tobacco and etc., which India didn't. And a lot of channels, they were allowing channels to uplink tobacco ads from there, so long as they were not downlinking it in Singapore. And you see, that's where awareness about technology and its impact tells you where it lies. Thank God perhaps Indian parliamentarians then didn't know that it's downlinking which ought to be banned. We would have missed the bus.
Yeah, but in any case, since he's raised the point, and someone had just in the last session mentioned about this, there is a misguided notion which is floating around the country for several years, that certain images and sounds can corrupt people. About 10 years ago, a channel called FTV was introduced, Fashion TV. It was banned for about 2 years, and finally I think they went to court and won, and that's how the ban was lifted. You'll be surprised that that channel is shown everywhere. It does not even register on the TRP meter because it is so poor, and it continues to show half-nude models because nobody is, once you take away the taboo part of it, it is so boring that not even the youngsters are willing to watch it. So the more you try and restrict, the more attractive it becomes. It's happened with the prohibition earlier,
Exactly. The ban on liquor actually.
Yeah, I'm surprised, that in a month ago in Kerala they are talking of, which is, Monu will bear me out, but it's a completely regressive step. And please see the kind of economy, the social fabric of Kerala. What do you think was the... Yeah, would you like to comment on this?
I don't dare. There may be a journalist from my home state in the audience, but I'd like to say, quite frankly, it's absolutely absurd. I mean, I have a voting card that says Haryana, so I consider myself a Haryanvi. And in Haryana, Bansi Lal introduced prohibition. The mafia came in Gurgaon after that. law and order started declining in Gurgaon after Mr. Bansilal wanted to stop Haryanvis and from drinking. So I quite, I mean, in Saudi Arabia, you have banned so many things. Now, the minute you go into a Saudi aircraft, the ladies just, if the window is open, they'll throw it out of the window. They may break open the window and throw it out. When they land in Rome or London, they're in micro minis. You can't see the dress. The same people who go in shrouded in blankets on the aircraft, by the time they get off, you can't see them wearing anything. So, you cannot legislate behavior. I'm all for saying temperance is good, alcohol is bad, but do it through social conscientization. Don't do it through force of law. In our country, unfortunately, we have got this very Victorian colonial habit of using law and constantly calling upon law. The last 10 years of the UPA government have been particularly bad. A whole raft of laws. For example, you have these massive laws about exploitation of women. Has that stopped? Because of these laws. It's become worse.
I think, yes, Sujit, that will be the last question.
To that, what the gentleman's going to say is that breaking news happens on the medium you are on. Breaking news doesn't happen on X, Y, or Z. Like I, many a times consciously do not watch news on television in the evening so that I can peacefully read the newspaper in the morning. So breaking news happens to me in the morning.
You're an exception.
Thank you.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Mr. Channa, I just want to draw your attention on the reference made by Major Ravi. Major Ravi made it very clear, and whatever he said in a very responsible manner, he has made a statement. Not only a statement, he also made a reference. Dr. Subramania Swami's opinions are not taken seriously by the previous government. Now, the important fact is the former Prime Minister assassination is a very major issue across the country, especially against a particular speaking community. It's a black mark, rather black dot on the community. Now, this particular forum have any plan to take up this issue with the Government of India to find out who is the real culprit. He said, I am ready to come anywhere. Wherever the new investigations are taking place, I will appear and I will tell the truth. This forum has any plan to take up this issue with the Government of India to find out who is the real culprit of Rajiv Gandhi killer?
I think this is not the mandate of this forum.
I'm just asking very.
No, it is not our mandate. And in individual capacities, whoever has the interest in it, whoever has the wherewithal, stamina, resources, need, can always, in personal capacity, move and shake the system and do this. Our mandate was to offer a platform where issues are flagged, people raise their opinions, new ideas, discuss them. And I think that's where we'll end. Thank you so much for being patient participants. Shruti, you have
One more thing, which I think we need to be sensitive about, especially if you go to UP or Madhya Pradesh, you still see Madhya Pradesh Shashan. In fact, Mr. Nalpat was mentioning rule and administration. Shashan is rule. Prashashan is administration. Many of the states you'll find that it says, like I think in Delhi it says Delhi Prashashan, Delhi administration. You go to Madhya Pradesh, it says Madhya Pradesh Shashan. It used to be a couple of years back also. And I think I saw very lately in UP also, Uttar Pradesh Shashan on a car. So I think that mindset also, like, we definitely need to change.
The official language is, and then the nomenclature in Hindi is Prashasan.
Administration is Prashasan.
No.
Shashan
It's
is rule.
all everywhere it is meant. The Hindi equivalent is, the official is Prashasan. अगर कोई इसका प्रयोग कर रहा है वो
You want to write Madhya Pradesh government, you want to write Madhya Pradesh administration with the choice of the state.
No, but
Shashan and Prashasan.
No,
Shashan Prashasan is government and
Rule, the law
administration.
and law.
Government and administration, that's the two.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is similar to what was referred yesterday also. There is an IMB ministry. The nomenclature is so redundant that it ought to be called media ministry. because broadcasting is as Jurassic, or going to be, as it can get. Now, language related issues, you also have Director General or Controller of Imports and Exports, as if there is a flood waiting at your door and you have to, you know, like a finger in the dike, keep it away. No, I mean, this shows the mindset. Perhaps with changing mindset, language nomenclatures will also, probably people needs to get sensitized. But it was a wonderful experience trying to put together this 2-day, 6-session workshop dealing with 40 odd speakers, 5 specific topics on this vertical. I was wondering what we'll get at the end of it. I'm frankly surprised. I hope in the years to come we will have even more participation, even more issues to discuss, and more meeting together in other destinations.
And many congratulations to you,
Thank you.
Sushil.
But thank you so much for being part of it. It has been a learning experience for most of us, and we hope to keep it going, expand the agenda, and get more people in the fold in the times to come. Thank you so much for coming.